So yeah, I'm currently an assistant professor at the Università della Svizzera Italiana in Lugano. I have a background which is a bit variegate, but basically focused on management. I did my Ph.D. at Bocconi. I got it in 2016, as far as I remember. And then I joined the Emlyon, actually. So I'm a former professor of here. 2 great years that I spent with a lot of work, with a lot of good friends. But then, for family reasons and so on, we decided to move to Lugano, and now I'm there, basically doing research on my stuff, I would say. Yeah, well, I typically work at the intersection between corporate strategy and stakeholder theory, but I would say that along my limited career, I've been expanding a little bit my path on the two sides. So on the one hand, on the corporate strategy part, and the other on the stakeholder theory part. And I was lucky enough to publish a couple of papers in each of the two. Yeah, that's basically, I would say, the core of my research. Yeah. It's an interesting question. So originally, I have to say that I used to be a consultant in M&A. So I kind of know the context. So familiarity in this case plays a strong effect. That's why I would potentially frame myself more of a corporate strategy scholar than a stakeholder scholar. But I kind of got fascinated in stakeholder theory because this idea of different elements and especially different interests which need to be combined by managers into one single core, into one single decision. And so the complexity of the objective function, which increases as a function of the attention to the stakeholder, is something that has fascinated me since the very beginning. Well, the short answer is writing and rewriting the paper many times, because sometimes you take an angle of it, sometimes you take another angle of it. I think the general idea is to consider what one literature is giving to the other, and vice versa. And in a way, if I manage to weight which of the two contribution to the other literature is better, I typically focus on one approach or the other. This is somehow the path that I kind of follow in a specific paper. Regarding the different conversation with different fields, more in general in my career, I think it's an interesting thing to do, typically because you benchmark with different scholars and people which have different opinion about our field, which is just informative, I would say, to me as a researcher. The field of acquisition has been more or less clear about the fact that when companies are selecting a target to acquire, they are facing information asymmetry because they don't know where to get information. Some informations are hard to transmit, so it's complicated. And so, in general, they tend to rely on simplification, on heuristics, on cognitive shortcuts. But to be honest, that literature is not so developed. So we actually thought about that by looking it from the perspective of categories. So categories can be seen as cognitive shortcuts. If there is something which is typical, which we typically derive a lot of information from the prototype to the individual or to the object that you're observing. And so for that reason, we think it could represent a form of something that at least could influence, the cognition vis-a-vis a firm. And so we decided basically to apply it to the context of M&A because of what I said at the beginning. And so it's basically, that's where the paper started. I think it's a bit hard to say, to be honest, what's going to be the future of it. Also because sometimes I even see it more as a context in which to study other theories. What I think is fascinating of this world is that it allows to study specific decisions. And what then can be interesting to study is how these decisions are biased, are influenced, are basically are away from a logic of pure rationality that, at least for the economists, is so important. But there are actually a ton of different elements which are in the heads of the top management team, which could carry an influence on it.
Okay.
But I think what you're saying is correct. It's a pain. I also have fun, to be honest. I like to stay close to the data the most that I could, because I kind of like to play with the data. About accessing them, well, there is little to say there. In many cases, you have to buy this data. To be honest, in many cases, you buy lemon. So you buy stuff which are totally irrelevant. They have no variance and so on. But the nice thing of our age is that there are a lot of free data. There is a lot of data that are actually available, which are shared by researchers and so on. But that's a good thing, I think. I think for combining and cleaning is work. It's just working, playing a lot with, I typically use data, but I could also use, for instance, SQL, which is a little bit of an older programming language. But I think, there is it can also be fun up to a certain level. At least you can listen to music when you're doing it. It's hard. It's hard. There is a good amount of luck for everybody. My feeling is that if I should give one suggestion about that, is not to rush. Don't rush a paper to submission when you are at the early stage of the career, because this is typically a situation in which you don't get much out of that. Ask feedback. This is very important, especially people which are familiar with the journal to which you are submitting. You want to submit to management science, send to somebody that has published, potentially is even in the editorial board of it, or at least in the review board of it, and try to get the most information that you could out of them. This is, I think, one simple thing that we can all do. And then it's a process of learning. So learning from somebody else could actually be useful. I think this is in general something that a young scholar should consider, that if he or she doesn't really feel ready, to associate with people which have a little more experience and try to learn from them. One I already gave you. So try to learn from especially people that are still, publishing a lot. They are pulling in a way, but use it as an occasion not to publish, to learn how to handle the process, to learn how to respond to reviewers and all these kind of things. The other thing, which is a little bit more related to publishing, is potentially find the right editors. It seems a trivial thing, but in my experience, that's what is twisting the chances of a given paper. If an editor is fitting, is knowledgeable about that, very likely you can get the reviewers which are knowledgeable about that and can help you, rather than, bringing a review process here and there in different kind of directions. And so it's actually, not only more efficient, it's actually more successful in general. But the only thing that I would very much suggest is never stop learning, which seems a bit trivial, but to be honest, read. When you get, when there is a new methods which is coming out, try to understand it. Same for data, same for theories up to a certain level, because that's also the beauty of our job.
Yep.